Hello and welcome to this video. I am your host, Pannobhasa, also known as David Reynolds. And I'm sitting here on the balcony of my very sweet little apartment and drinking ginseng tea. And I've been thinking about doing a little video on the topic of dukkha, which is central to Buddhism. In fact, in one famous sutta, the Alagādupama Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha says that all he teaches are two things, dukkha and the cessation of dukkha, which is dukkha and the end of dukkha. And dukkha usually is rendered into English as suffering. So you can say that the whole purpose of Buddhism is to teach about suffering and the end of suffering, which sounds kind of pessimistic, although after all, he is teaching the end of it, so that's not too pessimistic, I suppose. And the meaning of dukkha is, there really is no word in the English language that really describes dukkha. There's not one word that contains the entire spectrum of meanings of dukkha, because dukkha, it can mean anything from just the slightest subliminal discomfort to just unbearable agony. Usually it's rendered as suffering, sometimes in older texts even as pain. I think Ajahn Thanisaro prefers the term stress, although usually I render it, if I'm translating the word from Pali into English, I will usually render it as unease, which it does seem to fit pretty well. And also it's convenient because the opposite of dukkha is sukha, and sukha is often translated as ease. So you got sukha is ease, dukkha is unease. And according to the commentaries, they have a kind of folk etymology where dukkha, it just means hard to bear. They've got it as a du means like badly, and ka, it comes from the verb supposedly of comedy, which means to accept or to be patient with. So according to the commentaries, dukkha means just hard to be patient with, hard to accept because it's unpleasant. But I think that's probably a fake etymology. So anyway, it is central, and to understand dukkha is really essential to understanding Dhamma or Dharma. And just recently, I happened to see this academic paper for the Journal of Global Buddhism. And it was written by a certain person that may as well remain nameless. But this person was saying that there should be there's already three types of dukkha, or three causes of dukkha that are mentioned in the text, and I'll get to those. But this person was saying that there should be a fourth one added, and that's the dukkha caused by sexism, racism, and other kinds of injustice. And this really reflects just really a lack of understanding of what Dharma is all about. But the same person was saying that Buddhism is just whatever Buddhists want it to be. It's like a postmodern, there is no underlying like foundational truth to Buddhism, according to like these postmodern academics. It's just whatever people want it to be, essentially. Like you can be whatever gender or you want to be, anything like that. So if you want to be a Buddhist and you want to believe that Buddhism teaches this or that, then that's just what it teaches, because just because, essentially. So according to the commentaries, there are three kinds of dukkha. The first is dukkha, which is just pain and sickness, just physical ickiness. That's like the first most obvious kind of dukkha. But there are two other kinds that are mentioned in the commentaries. One is called viparinama dukkha, which is the dukkha caused by change. And I can speak about that from personal experience lately, just because my entire life has changed radically. And for me, it really wasn't, that aspect of it wasn't all of that dukkha inducing. But I have read that there's lists of the most stress inducing events in a person's life. And even just moving from one house to another can be very stress inducing for a lot of people, even if it's not considered to be something that they don't want to do. I mean, they might be quite willing to move, but still just the stress of like your daily routine, what you're used to, getting broken down and having to restructure it, something like that can cause dukkha. So viparinama dukkha, or the dukkha of change, is the second of the three main kinds of dukkha that is mentioned in the commentarial tradition. And the third kind, which is interesting to me, is called sankhara dukkha. And sankhara dukkha is the dukkha or unease, the suffering, if you want to call it that, that is the result of just having a body, just living, just existing in samsara. I mean, there's just things you have to do that aren't particularly pleasant just to exist. And like brushing your teeth every day, it's not exactly pleasant, you just have to do it. One of my favorite old examples is refolding a road map. And I mean, they don't use road maps anymore, but every once in a while you get something in an envelope and you're trying to put it back in the way you got it, and it's like you have to have it folded just right, all the pages in the right order so that the folds fit exactly and everything, that kind of thing. It's like sankhara dukkha. And coming back to America, it's like I've been experiencing a lot of really novel sankhara dukkha for me. Living in Burma, you've got your own kinds of sankhara dukkha. You know, you got like bugs and heat and sweat and all that kind of stuff. But the sankhara dukkha in America is just like just trying to get a credit rating. That in itself, I mean, you got to go through all this, jump through all these hoops, all these technical things. Anything that works right the first try, you just feel like patting yourself on the back or just heaving this sigh of relief because you haven't hit any obstacles. Like as I've been saying, and this is a convenient opportunity for me to plug the book that I just had published. I just got the book on Amazon. It's Essays in Theravada Buddhism. If I remember, I'll include the link underneath this video so that anyone who's interested, it is an interesting book. That if you're interested in like an original look at Theravada Buddhism, or just at very early primitive Buddhism, you know, the Buddhism that goes as far back to the time of the Buddha as possible, then yeah, it would be worth your while to read it. But just getting the thing published, there's so much sankhara dukkha. It's like, for example, I was using, I'm like tech illiterate borderline, so I was using this app that helps you to format a book, and in the formatting, it just had like a sample copyright page that had a sample ISBN number, and I didn't change that. And so it was like, I had like a fake ISBN number for the book, and then I had to go back and change everything for that. And then because so much of what was in the book was from like articles that I had written that were on the internet on a blog that no longer exists, that they're saying, well, it's like they weren't sure that it was really my book, that I had written it, that they thought maybe I had just like taken it off of somebody else's website or something. So it's like all these technical glitches, and then you do the thing that you're supposed to do, and then they come back and then it's like you get the exact same notification. You know, you change anything and then it just goes back to scratch, and then you got to go through all the steps again. So that kind of stuff is sankhara dukkha. And in a way, it's kind of unfortunate that the commentaries even bother to divide things up. I mean, even letting alone the neo-Marxist academic that's trying to throw critical race theory in there and marginalizing, you know, people of color as like the new fourth kind of dukkha in Buddhism. But really, you just get down to the very basics of Buddhism, and all dukkha is caused by attachment and craving. You know, the first noble truth of Buddhism is the truth of dukkha. If you exist, you're going to experience dukkha. You're going to be unhappy at least some of the time. And you're never going to be absolutely 100.0% happy. There's always going to be at least a little bit of dukkha mixed in. So even in Buddhism, it says, even happiness is a kind of dukkha, which is, for me, that seems pretty pessimistic. I mean, you could twist things around the other way, but I won't trouble you with that. But yeah, it's like not getting what you want is dukkha. Getting what you don't want is dukkha. Being separated from what you love is dukkha. Getting sick sometimes is dukkha. Getting old is dukkha. Dying generally is unpleasant. Even being born is dukkha. I mean, it's like most human beings are born screaming. So the first noble truth is the noble truth of dukkha. And the second noble truth is the cause of dukkha, which of course is tanha, or literally thirst, usually translated into English as craving. There's like a variation where you can say that the cause of dukkha is attachment, but they're very similar. One causes the other. So it works out the same either way. And the third noble truth is the cessation of dukkha, which is, if the craving ceases, then the dukkha ceases. It's just like a logical consequence of the second noble truth. Second noble truth is that suffering is caused by craving. So the third noble truth just is like the logical consequence of that. Is like, if suffering is caused by craving, then if you eliminate the cause, you eliminate the effect. The cause being the craving, and the effect being the suffering. So, and then the fourth noble truth is the path, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. And at the risk of embarrassing myself, let's see, it's right view, right attitude or mental action, right verbal action, right physical action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And I don't want to really go into details on all of those. Maybe I can do a different one, just going over the Noble Eightfold Path. But the main point here is the dukkha aspect. And one very important thing to realize, and I think a lot of people, maybe most people, even most Buddhists don't realize this, is that dukkha is a volitional mental state. And ultimately that means that all dukkha is volitional, and thus it is avoidable. It's essentially self-inflicted. And most people just don't get that. It just seems so obviously untrue. But I mean, even just setting aside how karma can cause physical pain to happen to you, the physical pain itself, you can call that dukkha, but really what, in a philosophical sense, and what the Buddha was trying to find the cure for, and what she presumably did find the cure for, is the mental dukkha. Because physical pain is just a sensation, and you can be happy while feeling physical pain at the same time. Like a grueling workout can make jocks happy. You can be mountain climbing or something. Some guys like getting in fights. I mean, in the heat of passion, you can be biting or scratching somebody, and it's all pleasant. So like physical pain is not the same as suffering. It's two different things. So if you have physical pain, let's say you got a toothache, and like Shakespeare said, there never was a philosopher who could endure the toothache patiently. The toothache itself is not directly caused by the pain. It's caused by the desire for the pain to stop. And with some kinds of pain, it's so intense, we're so hardwired not to want pain, because pain indicates, it's like a red warning light. It's indicating that the body is damaged or getting damaged. So just our animal instincts cause us to have just an intense, immediate aversion for intense pain. But nevertheless, what is really causing the suffering is the desire for the pain to stop. And that is ultimately under our control, at least potentially. If people if they suffer and they feel like it's not their own doing, Like they don't feel like they are deliberately causing it on themselves. It's caused by like subconscious habits just built in through conditioning, and almost everybody has that. Only an enlightened being, presumably, doesn't have a subconscious mind. It's just conscious all the way down. For the rest of us, we've got a subconscious mind, and in that subconscious mind, you've just got automatic conditioning working itself out, which includes aversion for this, aversion for that, the craving for this, craving for that, that results in suffering. And there's a number of examples I could give from my own experience of really obvious cases of desire causing suffering. And so one being that I used to live at this monastery in Burma, and I was told when I first moved there that there was 24-hour electricity there, which I knew couldn't possibly be the case because this was Burma we were talking about. But it turned out to be like 23 hours a day of electricity. And it was up in the hills, so I had to heat water to take a bath. It was really cold well water. So I would decide I want to take a bath, or I want to heat water for some reason. And then the power would go out. You know, it would just go on and off at random. Mostly on, but still it was unpredictable when it was going to go off. And just immediately I'd be wanting to take that bath, and then I'd just start grumbling and just sort of getting all grouchy and frustrated because I wanted to take a bath. And I mean, that was the cause of the suffering. And I could remind myself, it's like all I have to do is just accept that the power's out and there's no suffering. But it's like karma, which is like a mental momentum. It's just the force of habit. And so for most of us, the best you can do is just be mindful and just watch the frustration and the desire and the grumpiness come up and sort of detach from it, because it's really not you. I mean, if you can observe it arising, then, I mean, if you are anything at all, you're the one who's observing it arising, not the thing that's being observed. So just by observing the desire arising again and again, it doesn't make the suffering entirely go away, but at least you're detached from it and you're not identifying with it. You know, it's not like I am miserable. It's just, you know, suffering is arising, you know, frustration is arising. So that is one of the most important things to bear in mind with regard to Buddhism, with regard to life in general, is that ultimately our unhappiness is self-inflicted. Our happiness also is self, you know, we bring it onto ourselves. So you can argue the karma, the metaphysics of karma, saying, you know, it was like you were a soldier in the Roman legions 2,000 years ago, which is causing you to get attacked by somebody now. You know, you can set that aside. Regardless of that, wanting yourself not to be attacked now is causing the suffering. Just being attacked is not the same as suffering. Just having somebody punch you in the nose, for example, is not the same as suffering. I mean, that's physical pain, but the actual mental suffering is caused by your refusal to accept the situation, your desire for the situation to be different. And everybody can work on that. And it's a heck of a lot easier to work on it if you at least acknowledge that that is the case. So getting back to the neo-Marxist so-called Buddhist academics saying that you know, suffering is caused by racial inequity or being marginalized or that sort of thing. And no, that's simply false. What really is causing the suffering is one's desire for things to be different, one's attachment to things being a certain way, and just insisting on things being a certain way. And yeah, if you set yourself up against empirical reality is going to win every time. So one of the most important aspects of wisdom is just realizing that you really ultimately do have the choice of being happy or unhappy. It really is up to you. And it really doesn't have a whole heck of a lot to do with external circumstance. That you can be happy as being a poor subsistence farmer in a military dictatorship. I know that from personal experience because I lived in a military dictatorship for more than 20 years. I lived in Burma for more than 20 years. Most of that time, it was a military dictatorship, a brutal and incompetent one too. But even so, the average Burmese villager, even then, probably had less dukkha, less unhappiness in his or her life than the average city dweller in America. And really, all you'd have to do is just walk around just counting smiles. Just look at this, the clear look on their face, the clear, untroubled look on the face of most people. And then you walk down a city in America and try and count smiles there, and you're not going to find very many of them. And it's really obvious. I mean, you go with the second noble truth: the cause of all suffering is desire. And the average Burmese villager just doesn't have very much desire. They got way less desire than the average American does. In America, you're encouraged to have desires. You've got all these advertisements telling you desire this, desire that, how you can't be happy unless you got this, you shouldn't be happy unless you got that. And so it's just desire is built into us, and or is conditioned into us. And most people just don't get it. Everyone's trying to be happy, and almost nobody really knows how. Even most Buddhists ignore the Four Noble Truths, or ignore the second noble truth anyway, that all suffering is caused by desire, and desire is volitional. You do have the choice, ultimately, if you're aware of your own mental processes enough to make the choice. And that takes some effort. Simplify your life a bit, slow things down a bit, and practice mindfulness, practice meditation if you're able to, and it makes things easier, and being happy is easier. But yeah, it's like happiness and unhappiness really are not ultimately caused by external circumstance. There was a study that was done on quadriplegics, people who had broken their neck or had some other misadventure that caused them to become paralyzed from the neck down. And they found that after a few months, maybe 2 months of just getting used to the idea, just kind of getting used to their new circumstances, they tended to be just as happy or unhappy as they were before. That happy people or cheerful people were just as cheerful, even though they were quadriplegic. Grumpy, gloomy people were just as grumpy and gloomy, even though they were quadriplegic. So it really is a matter of attitude, whether you're happy or not. And you really should not believe, even Dharma teachers sitting in Dharma halls in the West, talking about all the suffering that's caused by inequity or whatever, when from the Buddhist point of view, we are exactly where we need to be, because that is where our karma has placed us. And whether we are happy or unhappy is our own doing, just literally. It is ultimately our own doing. So a lot of people don't want to hear that. If somebody's really suffering and unhappy, you don't want to just say, well, it's your own goddamn fault, it's your own doing. That's not going to work. It's just going to make them even more unhappy. So in a case like that, maybe the best thing you can do is just give them a hug and send them lots of love. And maybe after they're being more philosophical, after things have calmed down a bit and they're more reflective, then maybe you could gently make suggestions along the lines of Buddhist philosophy. But yeah, the average unhappy person just isn't going to be willing to be philosophized at. And so just, yeah, the hug is about the best you can do in a lot of cases. But just as a review with regard to this little sermon on dukkha, that dukkha is caused by craving, tanha in Pali, which literally means thirst. And also just on attachment, or just insisting that things be a certain way, because we really do not have the authority to enforce that. And it's kind of foolish to insist on things being a certain way when we really don't have any guarantee that that's going to be the case. So we're just setting ourselves up for some frustration. So yeah, if you want to be happy, then have few desires. That's really what it boils down to. And if there are things that you really want in life, then you really should consider, if you think it's worthwhile, it's worth a bit of suffering. You want to have a family, you want to raise children. I mean, there's a lot of worry and a lot of insecurity, maybe. Yeah, a lot of attachment, that sort of thing. And so there's going to be some suffering involved. But if you really deep down feel that it's worth it, then sure. I mean, just to be afraid of any kind of suffering is kind of cowardly, actually. Maybe you could say that the suffering is caused by ignorance, and not wanting the ignorance is really what you're after, which is, yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah, I can accept that. But still, if we're living in the world, there's going to be at least Sankhara Dukkha and probably some Viparinama Dukkha. There's going to be change and just all kinds of complications, just getting things to work right, that sort of thing. So we just accept it with some equanimity, just philosophical detachment if we're capable of that too, and do the best we can. And ultimately, what it all boils down to, if you're happy or unhappy, it really is your own doing. And whether I'm unhappy or happy, it's my own doing. And putting the blame on somebody else, especially if if a Dharma teacher is putting blame on other people for somebody's unhappiness, then they really are not qualified to teach Dharma. Because it all boils down to the second noble truth, which is, just fundamental, just the backbone of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist ethics. So we do the best we can and be happy. And that is the end of sermon.